Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Eligible voters in Osun State, southwest Nigeria, are about now going to the polls to vote for the emergence of a new governor. And this comes after several months of campaigning, saber rattling, and sparring on the political arena by not just the governorship candidates of the various political parties, but also between their overlords and all. Joining us now to look at the possibilities and probabilities from this exercise is Achike Chude, a civil society figure and public affairs analyst. Good morning, Achike. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, I can hear you.
Oh, all right, bro. Good morning. Good to have you. Well, I mean, Osun is in the news. The only election for today and, the big one before 2023. Like Ekiti last month, a lot of people believe that this is a way to gauge the preparedness of INEC and to see, to gauge the thinking of the voting populace. What are your own personal expectations in Osun today? We know that there are two big parties contending, as they did 4 years ago, the APC and the PDP. But of course, there are three other ones, the Accord, the SDP, and the Labour Party. What are your expectations in terms of the candidates and the parties themselves, and in terms of the preparedness of INEC?
Well, my expectations would be that by the time the election is through and winners announced, we would have realized that we have taken another step towards a proper democratization of the political space in the country. That's one. I believe that every well-meaning Nigerian, has this same kind of expectation. My expectation is that we would have a much better conducted election in terms of the turnout, also in terms of a voter enthusiasm, in terms of relative peace and devoid of violence that will characterize the election, that would have a civil populace that conducts itself in a way that becomes a source of pride to us. And that is that, a civil populace that will not engage in anti-electoral law activity, such as vote buying and vote selling and all that. We also hope that the police, the security forces will conduct themselves in ways and manners that are consistent with the oath of office that they have taken. So we want to believe that every other thing, in terms of logistics and all the arrangements with regards to this election would, be done, hopefully, in expectation of the wishes of the Nigerian people, and that it will be a well-run, well-conducted election. So, so that ultimately at the end of the day, people would say, yes, this was not just, a free and fair exercise. It was a credible exercise. I think these are my expectations. And that's for the political parties. We would expect that they will behave themselves. In fact, if you look at virtually all the elections in this country, the weakest link in our electoral process have been the political parties, especially the major political parties. They are the ones that engage in all manners of democratic activities. They are the ones that induce voters. They are the ones that employ thugs. They are the ones that are guilty of virulent rhetorics and all that. So we hope that they will be able to show maturity and responsibility in this election.
I agree. I hope we all hope so too. When we look at Osun State itself, it does seem to be traditionally an independent state. And when I say independent, I mean independent of the consensus of the Yoruba region, for example, along political lines, especially when we look at presidential politics. How significant do you think Osun State is? Because currently it's an APC state. But if it were, hypothetically speaking, to fall to the PDP or to another party, how reflective is that of what we can expect as Nigerians in 2023? Or do you think that perhaps Osun State isn't as significant strategically for political parties?
No, I think every state is significant and strategic for political parties. Apart from the immediate political gains by the parties, They can boast that they're in control of a certain number of states and all that. So I think these things are good, and it's good for morale. It's good, enough to help galvanize, parties, members of the same political parties in other parts of the country. But we must say that using Osun State or any other state or any other individual state as a yardstick for measuring the 2023 general election is a completely different ballgame, because the stakes in the state gubernatorial election are absolutely different from what you have at the center. The stakes are much, much higher at the center. The intrigues, the backstabbing, and all the malvolence more or less that characterize elections really are usually on the uptake when it comes to national elections. But that is still not to say that Osun State is not significant. It is significant, it is strategic, and it could be a little bit of a barometer to gauge what might happen in 2023. But beyond that, again, is the fact that there's a difference between the election in Osun State and what happened in Ekiti State, which, of course, the APC won. Osun State is different in the sense that the political gladiators, the stakeholders are completely different. The motivations are different. For instance, in Ekiti State, there was almost this feeling that the PDP had given up on in Ekiti State on getting the governorship seat of Ogun State. Ekiti State. The fact that the apparatchik of the PDP did not even bother to do any major rally, which has been the tradition in Ekiti State, was clearly an indication that they felt that Ekiti State was lost to them. But for Osun State, it's a completely different ballgame. Apart from the non-attendance of about 3 governors of the PDP, a lot of their big guns were there, as well as their presidential candidate. That shows the significance of Osun State. But that significance was made possible, or is made possible by the weight and the influence of their candidate, that is Adeleke. He's a very flamboyant politician. He's a grassroots politician. He is somebody that is, almost clinched the last election, even though that election was won amidst the criticism of fraud and all that, electoral fraud and the rest. But at least it is going to be a very closely run election, and it could go either way. Of course, there are other political parties. It's not just the 2 dominant political parties, but there's a reason why the 2 parties, PDP and APC, have been dominant. Others are trying to make their entrance into the politics of the country, especially one of the newest political parties, the Labour Party. So, but it is expected that those parties that are already on ground all this while would make give a greater showing for the election.
All right, you're so correct about the reference to Ekiti State and how PDP performed, which of course will be different from what voters will experience today in Osun State. But then a lot of people think that an election of this nature is like a referendum on the sitting governor. The bulk of what we have heard from Governor Adegboyega Itola essentially is to say that he has had limited time to work and deliver for the people of Osun State, citing COVID-19, which took more than 1.5 years of his 4-year tenure, and then the NSAS, which also affected his state. You recall at the time that even his own convoy was attacked badly during the NSAS thing. First part of my question to you is, how much of a referendum do you think this will be on the governor himself? And secondly, do you think that with the standard bearers of the 3 leading political parties appearing at the campaign, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu for APC, Atiku Abubakar for PDP, and Peter Obi for Labour Party, how much of that do you think that it can influence the election, and what indication should we take from that as to how 2023 might be shaping, given the fact that these are the 3 leading ones?
Yeah, well, let me dispense with the last observation before going to the very first one you talked about, with regards to referendum.
Yes.
And that is, how much the influence of the three leading candidates for the three leading political parties now, at least in the perception of Nigerians, how much it will help to sway the voters. And I think, we should remove P2B and the Labour Party out of the equation for now, because that will not be fair. Labour Party is just, a few months old, and they have been able to cover a lot of grounds in a way that has amazed a lot of Nigerians, essentially because of the activities of the youths who seem to have embraced the Labour Party and all it stands for, especially the candidates. But so I think it will be grossly unfair. They have not built the kind of momentum that is needed to make, an impact. You have the other two political parties that have been there for all of 22, 23 years of the unbroken democracy. Let's forget the fact that the APC, was put together before the 2015 election to achieve electoral victory. But virtually all the people within the APC platform have been involved in the politics of this country for a long time, long before now. So I think essentially it is going to be based on these two political parties, and I don't really believe that the influence of their political leadership at the national level will sway the election much, because at this particular point in time, the minds of people are usually made up. Of course, you will have maybe last minute independence and all that, but obviously a lot of people have their minds already made up, and there's no late show from any side that is going to sway the minds of the people. But beyond that, again, we're going back to the issue of referendum. Every election, whether at a local level, at the state level or national level, is a referendum on the performance of the incumbent. Of course, don't forget that the National Assembly, for instance, has been talking about the loss of about over 170 of their members. The fact that they have put in so much work all this while, garnered experience and all that, and then they go for primaries and they lose out, and then they are all crying wolf. And the National Assembly now wants to change the laws to favor their members and all that. But I think that in a way it is wrong, because what has happened to the members of National Assembly that did not make it at the primaries was simply a referendum. The people passed a vote of no confidence on them. And so, yes, the Governor Yetola can give reasons why he doesn't think he performed so well. If that is what he's saying, that means he's admitting that he has performed below par. I don't think people want to. We are getting to a level where people don't want to accept excuses. They want performance. And so, yes, COVID-19 and all that, but others have been able to make a significant impact, even with the advent of COVID-19 and all that. So that should not really be an excuse. But beyond that, really, is it more, if you look at the issue of electoral, vote buying and vote selling, would you say that the people themselves are actually exercising their democratic franchise if they are being induced to engage in democratic practice, such as selling their conscience, selling their votes, and all that? So ultimately, it might not be exactly, the result might not be so much dependent on the free exercise of the franchise of the people, but essentially be as a result of, the unwholesome participation of the people themselves in an anti-democratic practice in the election. I mean, that is just what it is, whether it is in Ekiti State, Osun State, Anambra State, Zamfara State, and the rest. For as long as money changes hands between, political parties and the people who are supposed to vote for them, you cannot exactly say that the people voted on the basis of their perception of the performance of an incumbent, or the basis of the performance of somebody who wants to take over from an incumbent. So, I mean, these are two things. So ultimately, it might not exactly be that it is the people themselves that have actually, exercised their franchise on the basis of their belief about the performance of an executive, or the belief of, the possible performance of somebody who wants to come in.
All right, Achike Chude, I want to thank you for joining us this morning on The Morning Show. Thank you so much.